Hello everyone, it's Sue from Loreny Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at tarot decks with attitude. So a couple of weeks ago I did a VR to the Cosmic Reaper that was entitled Oracles with Attitude, and I thought that it was such a fun concept. So basically I was going through my collection and of the Oracle decks that I've got, and I was picking out the decks that I believed when you personalize a deck, those ones in specific showed a bit of an attitude, a bit of a tongue-in-cheek or a sassy kind of vibe to them. And I thought it was a brilliant video to film. So kudos to the Cosmic Reaper. But while I was filming the video, choosing and going through my Oracle decks, there were a lot of tarot decks that was calling out to me saying, I got an attitude too. And so I thought at a certain point, I really have to do this because otherwise it will feel like it's just not even somehow. And I think that on the one hand, when you look at Oracle decks, it's probably easier to expect a bit of an attitude, or at least when you do personify your decks, you tend to believe that Oracle decks have a little bit of leeway or more room to move freely in rather than a tarot deck, because tarot decks obviously follow a system. And I can assure you 1000% it doesn't matter. There's some tarot decks that even though they do follow a system, whether it's RWS or Thoth or Marseille, they're just really quirky. But it's not just quirky, it's the vibes. It's the fact that they answer back to you and they're really short and sharp, and they have this kind of what we call attitude. So let's have a look at what I found while going through my collection, and I think that everyone will agree on the first one here. There it is. I mean, come on. Let me just zoom in. This is the Barbara Walker Tarot. We all know this deck. It's coming in a tin. I know a few people that have the full size indie edition, or whether it's probably not indie, it was already published mass market, but it was a full size deck. And a number of times I asked myself if I wanted to splurge, because you can still find them, but they're rather expensive because they're out of print. And I asked myself, do I really want to bear the brunt of Barbara's yelling at me on a full-size deck? I mean, looking at the tiny one, it's not entirely tiny, but it is a tarot in a tin, so it's obviously smaller than a full size. This is already powerful enough to make me cringe all the time. So do I really want to go through the full power of a full-size deck? I'm not entirely sure. I'm still debating that. I do, however, recognize that this deck is probably well known to be really short of temper. And whenever you're looking for an answer to a question, if you're not having a very relaxed and grounded and well-balanced day, please do not reach for this deck, because even though it is a sharpshooter, it's probably a little bit of a too sharp a shooter, if you know what I mean. And so I don't necessarily think that this deck should be used in when you're in a lighter kind of mood, because it is one of those decks that is just really not coating what it says. It's not sugarcoating at all. It's just showing things in the worst possible way. And because it is so humanized, I strongly believe that many decks can be sharpshooters, but perhaps they're nature-themed or animal-themed or fairy. For example, Brian Froud's decks, which are predominantly based on fairies, they are really exceptionally good decks when you want to expand the message, because they're mostly, I think all of them, they're Oracle decks. I could be wrong. The ones that I know are just Oracle decks. But they're really good whenever you want to expand the message from a tarot pool, a pool from a tarot deck. And so they are sharpshooters on the one hand, but on the other hand, because they're based on the realm of the fairies, they're not exactly... you still feel like there's a filter between yourself and that kind of realm. Instead, Barbara Walker's tarot, it's just that kind of, I mean, we could be one of these characters, you know, looking at this Kali card, which is the Queen of Swords, and the Queen of Swords is my significator. I'm like, do I really identify with this? And I just, on the one hand, there's part of me that says, yeah, you do. And on the other hand, there's, you know, the angel and the devil on the shoulder. And there's another sweet part of myself that says, no, of course not. But this deck is really direct. And I like to think that I'm a direct person, but there's a couple of things that, you know, you think somehow, do you really need to be that cruel, you know, when delivering a message? You can still be effective by perhaps saying things in a more diplomatic way without having to be so tongue-in-cheek. But that's the beauty of this deck. It is absolutely direct and tongue-in-cheek and sassy and cruel sometimes. It definitely is, and it definitely does an attitude. So that's definitely my first pick for tarot decks with an attitude. The second deck that I wanted to show you for this video today is the Pocket of Vines Tarot. Now, this is an indie deck, and it's created by Nevada Buckley. It has been out of print for a while, and then a couple of months ago, there was a reprint in the shop. I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's out of, so it's been sold out now. If it's not, in any case, I will put the link in the description box below, just in case you want to check this tarot out, and you, or if you even want to purchase it. Okay, just to tell you, I really struggled to take this deck out of the box, so that already shows you how much of an attitude this deck has. So, just a quick word about this deck. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really, another really great reader, sharpshooter, but this is not for the faint of heart. It's not necessary for the artwork, and by the way, if you're wondering why some of these cards have got a couple of stains, is because I actually bought it this way. Because it was slightly damaged, I actually could get it for a very reasonable price, and to be honest with you, I actually don't mind. Because this is not one of those decks that has full colors and therefore a stain will be noticeable. This is one of those decks that is monochromatic or bichromatic anyway, and I really strongly believe that in many cases it actually gives a really nice air of being antiquated. And because the base colors of this deck itself are more on the sepia tones, I really find it almost endearing. But then, you know, I'm challenged to say that word because endearing is not something that I would normally say about this deck. This is definitely not one of those decks that holds your hand and pats you on the back. And no, this is a really... It's a very strong deck. It's got a very strong personality. If you do personify your decks, you will understand when I talk about confrontational, but not confrontational in the sense that the creator may use the art in a confrontational way to shock you or trigger responses from you. No, this is the person that has just a touch of opposition defiant disorder, and they want to impose their own view in the world onto you, and more often than not, they're actually right. And that's what's really bothering you deep down. That's what bothers you, because you have your own ideas and you don't want to be confronted with somebody else's, especially when they tell you that yours are wrong. And so when you find out that they were actually right and you were wrong, yeah, it's not the best of feelings. As you can tell, it's also kind of sticking. The cards also sticking one to the other. I don't know what happened. I don't know why there was this kind of staining. When I got it, I just was happy to get it at that discounted price. But I have to be honest with you, again, I really don't mind. The only thing that I do mind about it is that the cards actually kind of stick together. But I can use the magic powder because some of you have actually suggested that. So the magician's powder, not the magic powder, sorry. You know, to just coat it a little bit, and that will prevent the cards from sticking one to the other. So another quick word about this deck. It is a tarot deck, but technically I don't use it as a tarot deck. I actually use it as an oracle deck, and because it's got all of these really good titles, so the Entwined with Choice, Love and Passion, for example, the Creative Advice with Devoted, Visions and Honest, I completely switch my mind off when I look at it. I switch my tarot mind off and I look at the keywords with the oracle mind. I do prefer to do it that way because unless I practice and practice again with this deck and I get really super comfortable with all of the renamings, because as you can see, for example, Cups has been renamed as Vessels, which is kind of logical, and Swords has been renamed as Needles, which is also kind of, you can infer that, it's not a difficult thing to do. But then you look at Eyes and you think it's most likely Pentacles. And the other suit, I don't even know what the other suit is, because as I said, I completely switched off my tarot mind and I switched on my oracle mind. And I just prefer that when I don't have to work out, you know, the difference in the naming of the suit of the court cards. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of renaming when it comes to the major arcanas as well. So, Chance of Rain, how cool is that? I absolutely love this card. I don't, to be honest with you, can I be completely honest? I don't even know. I think it's probably a Major Arcana, Chance of Rain, but Fate, Progress, and Cycle. This tells me, and also the presence of all of the minors, the symbols of the minors, it tells me that it might be the Wheel of Fortune. Fate, Progress, Cycle definitely responds to that. But how, you know, it's so much better when you actually use it as an oracle deck. It's just amazing. And I actually do like the artwork as well. But yeah, this is definitely one of those decks that really has a bit of a sassy vibes to them and a bit of an attitude. So this is the Pocket of Vines Tarot. And the next deck that I wanted to show you is this absolutely gorgeous deck, which is the Star Power Tarot by Zigzag Girl. You'll probably know let's say, the series of decks that have been produced, the Star Power, the Mass Power, and I think there's a Moon Power as well. And some of them have been released with a holographic edging. I have the just normal one, you know, the Star Power. It's an indie deck, but so Charlie Quintero and the Zigzag Girl. I really enjoy this deck. I really do. It's one of the decks that, by the way, because of the quality of the products, this is one of the decks that I take with me when I travel. And because of that, I can assure you 100% it is one of the decks that I actually use the most out of my collection. And even so, this gilding is still perfect, 100% perfect. And it's weird because this is the typical kind of gilding that leaves a little bit of glitter in your hands whenever you use it. I've been using it for so long and so many times that it doesn't anymore. I believe it did at the beginning. It's fantastic. It shuffles like a charm, it fans like a charm, and it also reads with a clarity that many other decks do not have. Many other decks that have this kind of busy kind of art style, because if you're familiar with these decks, they are incredibly busy. There's a lot of symbols in the cards, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of saturated colors, so that means that in some cases they can also be clashing. But I don't know, I think this deck, with all the attitude that it's got, because, I mean, look, you've got, even the sun looks creepy sometimes, and it's got this really strong sense of self. But this deck is an exceptional reader. I absolutely love giving out readings with this deck. When I travel, with my husband, sometimes we travel in groups, and so we meet new people, which we really love. And whenever I say that I read tarot, they're always like, okay, can you read something for me? So it's something that I actually really enjoy doing. And you know, I always take this deck out of my bag and they all go, what is that? And it's so weird, but it's also so direct and sassy, definitely sassy. So it's one of those decks that really kind of triggers a response from someone who sees them for the first time. But then, and obviously, if the person I'm doing the reading for prefers a different deck, I usually take three to four decks, depending. If one of the three is a mini, then I will add another one. So I take, let's say, 3 to 4 decks whenever I travel. So obviously this is not the only one, and I can give a different kind of possibility to the person that doesn't necessarily like this. But I have to tell you the truth. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it actually is really cute. Everyone is really curious to look at the cards, and they're very curious to hear what the reading will be with this deck. And when there's this kind of attitude coming into the cards and the messages coming through the cards, it's actually kind of fun. Because I'm just a reader, you know, I'm just interpreting and relating the message back, so don't shoot the messenger. But it is an incredibly powerful and strong deck, and I actually highly recommend it. So this deck is definitely one of my tarot decks with an attitude. And the next deck that I want to show you, I need to zoom out a little bit because I actually have the giant edition of this. This is the Next World Tarot that has been written and illustrated by Christy C. Road. Christy is also a musician, and I have to say, I follow their Instagram account, which is really, really cool. Reminding me a little bit of Amy Winehouse, not for the style of music, but for the looks. This deck, though, has got nothing to do with music, or perhaps everything to do with music. What I absolutely love about this deck is that, first of all, it's really well balanced. There is absolutely no predominance of one feminine or one masculine energy in this deck. You do have a lot of characters that are expressing diversity, and it's very much appreciated. But it's also one of those decks that it's actually spot on in how to nail the meaning of the card with an image, how to attach that meaning to an image that, you know, it really resonates with every one of us. We can all identify, or we can find characters we can identify with in this deck. And granted, there is a lot of attitude. It is a deck that will give you a lot of attitude because it really has no filters. So it really does present reality and the reality of the world we're living in such a way that it's not, it's unadulterated, let's put it this way. So you, by using this deck, you don't expect the message to be veiled. You don't expect it to be subtle. You want to hear it out loud, and this is one of the decks that will definitely yell the message at you. I mean, look at this Ten of Swords, for example. Now I have to say that I have modified this deck because, as you can see, it's already quite big, and it was even bigger with the borders, with white borders, top and bottom, and also I seem to remember also a little bit on the sides. But at the beginning, I wasn't very familiar with this deck, and so I actually wrote down the a small, you know, cheat sheet on the cards. For example, this is AS, so this is the Ace of Swords, just to remind myself of what the card was, because it's not always straightforward. I mean, in some cases, of course, it is. This is the Three of Swords because it's the typical way on the RWS to visualize that. But this is the Six of Swords, for example, the Five of Swords. So the Five of Swords, this one, I have to say it's a really powerful card. This deck does come with the guidebook. It's I wouldn't call it a little white book because it's not little, but it's not a companion book. It's literally a guidebook for the cards, and I love the fact that the font is so big because I don't need glasses to read it. So it is, let's just jump to the Five of Swords because I really wanted to talk about it because it's not one of the cards you would associate immediately with the Five of Swords. So in this case, in the next world, the Five of Swords is a response to betrayal and abandonment, a symbol of resistance and a symbol of survival amidst an uncompromising anti-Earth society. She's powerful and stealthily upholding chaos and division, but only when it means silencing the oppressor. The Five of Swords is the act of believing in a just cause, while your co-conspirators, higher-ups, or supposed allies align with the other side for the sake of power. It's a moment of seeking resolution by not engaging in a project that hurts your your call. The Five of Swords asks you to walk the path of respect and humanity. This may cause you to lose your family, your friends, and your community if they stand for racism, transphobia, ableism, or whatever value system challenges your safety. The Five of Swords asks you to challenge stability in order to find safety. So I love this last sentence. So the Five of Swords asks you to challenge stability in order to find safety. I really, I feel that there is a completely new concept to the Five of Swords in this case, because to me, I'm used to read it as the gaslighting. Numerologically speaking, is the destabilization and the disruption that comes after the consolidation of, and perhaps stagnation also, of the Four. And it's before the movement that is re-established with the Six. But in this case, I really do appreciate what what Christie was expressing in this card, and how powerful. I can definitely feel how powerful this is. So moving on through the deck, this is Christie, by the way, or I believe it is. Because especially it does remind me of both Christie and Amy Winehouse, especially probably for the air. So in any case, this is an incredibly direct deck. It's one of those decks that really doesn't make any compromise. If the characters of the cards have their own truth and they want you to understand it, they want to communicate that to you. And it's obviously something very powerful because of the images in some cases being also confronting, strong images that are definitely not, blending in the background. There's also some kind of a power given to the voices of the oppressed, or the voices of the ones that are not usually heard, which is incredible, I believe. And I actually thoroughly enjoy using this deck in readings. I wish back when I don't know, I'm not entirely sure that it's still available. However, I know that it's very difficult to find the pocket version, so there was a pocket size version of this deck. And when I saw it, I thought to myself, I really want to see the artwork and all of the symbols in the cards. And so I really thought, I would have enjoyed the larger version, but I have to say, because it's so big, it's actually a bit difficult to shuffle. And this is one of the decks that I really want to use. So, I keep myself from not buying both editions and just keep this one to visualize the cards and to observe them and study them, and use the pocket version but it's okay. I mean, if I come across it, then one day I'll probably grab it. The next deck is also quite large, at least the box is, not necessarily the deck. This is the Loreny Tarot by Irene Lorenzi. So Irene is an Italian artist, fantastic art style I really, really enjoy. This deck is by US Games, if I'm not wrong. Yep, that's US Games, and I think it was printed a couple of years ago. This is a really interesting deck. I have to say, I really, really enjoy it. I know that there's a lot of people that don't vibe with this deck, especially with the art style. I have to say that it is the quirkiness of this deck that actually makes me like it even more. Let me just zoom in. The one thing that I wish were different is the book. It looks like a really nice book, and it is quality-wise. Of course, you have the, almost, let's say, part of the page with the image of the card. And it's a really beautiful art style, so obviously it makes for a really beautiful book. However, when we look at the writing and the meaning of the cards, it actually is very general, and it feels more like a little white book rather than a companion book to the deck. And this goes for both the minors, as you can see, and the majors, which is really a pity, because every now and then you can read about the description of what's going on in the card, but it's not always the case. And this is one of those decks that you really want to study, you really want to, spend as much time as you feel you need by looking at all of the messages coming out of the cards through the symbols. And you wonder how the choices were made, and what drove the creator to design the cards this way. There is so much that can be said about practically each and every one of these cards in this deck. But one thing that I can say, and I'm sure 100% about this because I have been using this deck for a while now, is that it does have an attitude. It comes with a really strong presence. And so it's a kind of presence that it's because it's so quirky and unusual, and also the way in which things are represented is unusual. It does necessarily puts you in high alert. It's one of those things that it's like a shot of coffee, let's say, directly into your veins. Is something really, really strong. And so because of that, you kind of listen to the voice it's got. And you kind of have to listen to the message because there's no closing your eyes to it. There's no turning your head away. You really have to confront yourself with whatever it is that comes out of these cards. As I said before, some people don't like it. It's a matter of gut feeling, and I completely respect that because we're not all the same. And it's actually, that is what makes tarot decks beautiful to me, because if we were all the same, we would have all the same decks. But in my case, I really do appreciate this deck in my collection because it is so quirky. It would be a fantastic deck for a study group, for example. I think I might actually propose this one to my members, although I'm not entirely sure that, there'll be more than myself liking this deck. But look at the full card. Isn't it absolutely amazing? I love everything about this. In some cases, it also gives me a little bit of Ciro Marchetti kind of vibes. I don't know if it's probably just me. But it does have that kind of really strong presence, and many cards have this kind of directness by breaking the fourth wall and looking directly at the reader. Others don't, of course, it's not all the same. But I really strongly believe that before we judge a deck, we really need to understand the meaning behind his creation. Because we don't always know what prompted the creator to, for example, choose this specific drawing to represent the star card. I mean, we see someone that is more usually seen, for example, in a Nine of Wands, someone who's been wounded, someone who's not complete. And yet there is the element of water that we do associate with the star card. But there's also communication here, for example, with the telephone lines. There's a presence of marine life. There's an empty vase. There is something that evokes a deeper meaning into the card itself. And then when you notice it, and I really don't think you can see this, but in here and in many other cards as well, there's a little bit of a message. And if you're smart enough and if you look for them, you can actually see them. There's a few cards, as I said, not all of the cards, obviously. But in this case, it reads, "Nothing is as it seems." And so this message to me it makes me think, it makes me stop. Because nothing is as it seems to me is something that refers probably more to the moon card rather than the star card. But then again, the moon card will necessarily bring about a sense of deceit with this message, whereas the star card instead, it's a message of hope. Nothing is as it seems. It's not as bleak as it seems. It's not as bad as it seems. And so I really like the possibility to look at the star card from now on in a different way, thanks to the fact that this deck has brought that to my attention. But definitely a sassy one, this one, I can assure you. So another deck that I want to talk about today in this video is the Cross Magic Tarot by Londa Marks. This is a deck that has been published a few years ago by US Games. It went out of print and I think it stayed out of print, so it's actually quite difficult to get a hold of a copy. It's an amazing deck and it's a straight shooter, and I have to say I use it a lot whenever I have to do readings for a client or for a member. We do bi-monthly or bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks, every other Saturday, I do a personalized reading for my members. And so sometimes whenever there's a question regarding, for example, finances or career, or let's say mostly finances though, career is probably more fiery than this. This is a deck that is well balanced, but is very earthy. If I have to pick one element that I think this deck really represents, is the element of earth. But as I said, I do find it very balanced. The fact that the crow is the symbol or the inspiration for this deck really gives me that vibe of the element of the air. But also, you know, you got a lot of fire in this deck as well. The only element I don't necessarily see portrayed in this card is the element of water, not necessarily because there's no water in the cards themselves, but because I would stay away from feelings when looking at this deck, to be honest with you. It is a very sharpshooter, and it's so sharp that it can actually cut. And I can assure you 100%, that's also one of the reasons why I use it for financial matters, because there's no leeway for, you know, being cutesy-dootsy when you're talking about financial matters. There needs to be a very clear and conscious awareness, because sometimes things need to be done. And so in this case, you know, I like to use a deck that will wake you up, because it's definitely something that will happen when I use it to do a reading. And I would say it's a great reader. Unfortunately, as I said, it's out of print, so it's hard to find. I was able to get it for a very reasonable price for a person that used to sell them, and they closed down the shop. But if you find a copy, I highly recommend it. And I think that for a period of time, and perhaps it will come back, there was an edition of this deck available in make playing cards without the borders. It wasn't made for profit, so I believe that there was no markup on the deck, so you literally just paid for the production of the deck and the shipping. I'm not entirely sure that it's available anymore. But if you do have the possibility to snatch a copy of this original deck, I highly recommend it, because it actually makes me a better reader when I'm facing topics, as I said, related to finance, mostly finance, but also career. And it is definitely one of those tarot decks with attitude. The next deck that I wanted to talk about, it's a deck that doesn't receive a lot of love. I haven't actually seen it much when it comes to social media platforms, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram. It's the Gothic Tarot illustrated by Joseph Vargo. And I feel like I have to specify that, because I'm afraid if you Google the Gothic Tarot, you probably get half a dozen results. This one is the one by Joseph Vargo, and it's an incredibly beautiful deck, I have to say. Don't necessarily think it's a mass market, is it? So I'm not entirely sure, but it looks like it's been published by Monolith Graphics in Cleveland, Ohio. So yes, it is a mass market. It's from 2002. Apologies, because I don't actually know whether it's still available or not. If it is, in any case, I will put the link in the description box below, as always. This is one of those decks that is incredibly vocal. I mean, look at this death card. There's so much messages coming out of this card. And and you can say the same for each and every one of these cards, which is actually weird, because it's got a very selective kind of color palette. It is a Gothic tarot, so obviously you have those kind of vibes, those darker kind of vibes. You got dark angels, you got Nosferatu, you got a werewolf, you got a skeleton as the King of Wands, and you got gargoyles, etc. You got devils, demons. So obviously it's a deck with a personality, and it's a personality that really loves their own emo phase. But it's also a very vocal one. I really like using this deck when I feel like reading directionality in the cards. And, you know, truth be told, I actually really love using this deck with another two decks. So one, for example, is the Tarot V, which is by Alejandro Colucci, and it's about vampires. And another one is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot by Baba Studio, because the I have to specify the edition. So I think my edition is the 3rd edition, even though I have the latest one as well. But in the latest one, they have tweaked a little bit the tint, or the coolness and warmness of the colors, and so it's not as bluish. But the edition that I've got, the 3rd edition, is very bluish, and it reminds me so much of these cards that when I use them together, which is very unusual for me to use 2 or 3 tarot decks together, but sometimes I do, it's because I really look at directionality. So I find sequences throughout the cards. I pay attention to where, for example, a character in the card is looking towards. If they're not looking towards me, are they looking towards the right? And what is the card on the right? And so on and so forth. And look at this 5 of Swords. Isn't it just amazing? But this is what I mean when I talk about a sassy kind of vibe. This is a deck that speaks so much and so loud that you cannot ignore it. And that's the whole meaning of this VR-inspired video. I really love this deck. I think it's really, really beautiful as well. It also is one of the decks that corresponds to my kind of vibes. I really do love this kind of horror themed decks. I wish there were more. And to be honest with you, I went on a splurge last year in and around Halloween. I think I did a video about it as well. But one of the decks that I am pretty sure is stable and safe in my collection is definitely this one, because it speaks so loudly. And also I want to say there's a couple of YouTubers that have presented this deck as modified down to just the artwork, and it looks superb. It looks absolutely superb. I will not do it because I actually like the titles in red. I think they represent a nice contrast with the bluish cards. But even down to just the artwork, it is a really glorious deck. So that was the last deck that I wanted to talk about today, and this is the Gothic Tarot illustrated by Joseph Vargo. This is a VR-inspired video to the Cosmic Creeper Oracles with Attitude, and it's the tarot decks with Attitude. So if you want to join me, absolutely go ahead and use the same hashtag. It would be so much fun to see your choices. But for now, have a great day.